Okay. Hello. What a day, man. This is great. So there's just these big, deep, and wide thoughts, right? And there's this thought that I like that has kind of been sitting with me the last couple days as I've been orienting around the types of conversations that I've been having and the place that I've been having them from, and kind of like what my heart is actually feeling and driving toward and moving in when I'm having these conversations, and I have large convictions, right, which are anchored very much in truth, but the truth to me, like the my having beheld the truth. That is now the existential anchor for my movements and thoughts and considerations and everything. Ooh, a bus. And so I want to like kind of just open up some of those feelings because I'm moving out of them in conversation, right? And so there's been this feeling that if you understand the problem, you can understand why Jesus is an important part of the solution, right? And this would be like kind of the crux of it all, right? It's the great junction point between the confliction of the church and the purity of man's experience with God, experience with God as Father, experience with God as King. I'll escape the bus lane in a second. Okay, let's go around the bus. Cool, okay. Yeah, and so we have this question, right? If you can understand the problem, then you can understand why Jesus is a vital part of the solution and what he did in solving the problem and why that's helpful and practical, right? And why talking about him and what he did is meant to be good news for everybody, right? And it touches on so many different ideologies and philosophies that it's very difficult to actually talk about because of all of the little linguistic pitfalls where people have over-defined words into a cage and are trying to get God to be confined into the same cage with that word, and so it becomes provocative, but also difficult, but also the glory of the secret place where you can be alone with God, where you don't have to deal with the nerve-wracking internal confliction of others potentially becoming offended or misinterpreting. You only have to deal with your own self as you argue with yourself. And that's what's so wonderful, is because you begin to locate the places where you have confliction inside of yourself, even when you're alone. And then in that place, you begin to find the need for a reference point and how you are anchoring and what you are anchoring off. And that's where the provocative question of what neurology is stating about how a person is already anchoring just physiologically, like how your brain does that, and what belief is, and that enters into a conversation where you can begin to connect the spiritual conversation of Scripture with the neurological conversation of science, and the continuity between those two becomes immensely helpful and mobile and a gift of this season when it comes to available wisdom on how to navigate inside of the world. And so when you're by yourself and you are trying to find that existential anchor, that's where it's so important you realize that you are anchoring off of a heart belief. And it's where you have conflictions between different beliefs that haven't actually merged with each other yet. I'm not paying very good attention and I drove the wrong way. Beliefs that haven't merged with each other yet. And because they haven't touched internally, they feel a tension of all that is in between them. They feel a tension of all that is in between them. And what you get to do in the secret place... All right, let me just back up then. You're all right. Beeping like that actually isn't helping. Okay. Yeah. I wasn't sure if that guy was going to shoot the gap, and then the light turned red before he did, and then I could have been assertive and taken my turn, but I'm not familiar with the culture of Colorado, and so I wasn't sure what I was supposed to do, and so I did what I did, and everything was fine. But yeah, inside you're anchoring off of your existential orientation of what you think is happening, and that's how you end up navigating what you believe in quiet without the conflict of others. The confliction that's brought about by many beautiful sounds in discord with each other. And when you begin to connect with what you believe, then you can begin to look for what other people believe and begin to harmonize with that. And that's where the sound becomes beautiful with others. And that's what's so important with unity, and really what so much of this is about. But when you understand the problem, you can understand why Jesus is such an important part of the solution. And so when you are looking for that reference point within yourself, yeah, this will be good. When you're looking for that reference point within yourself to anchor when you're feeling internal confliction within yourself, as your own beliefs have trouble reconciling with each other, and you are fighting the internal battle of personal integrity and identity and stability, and fighting your own insecurities where you do have a conviction but you don't know how to explain it. That's a wonderful time where in the secret place all of that insecurity can come to the surface. But then in that effort, you find even your own beliefs are immature and broken and not quite whole, or still asking questions, but still going off the gut instinct of what you feel is the case. And you find out that your observation of how things work, the nature of what's going on, is massive when it comes to how a human anchors in their belief, and therefore how they make decisions, both neurologically and scripturally speaking. As a man thinks in his heart, so he is, and there's a right hemisphere primacy that is calling the shots. And so it's in that ambiguous how space that we are actually operating. And it's right there that we find our limits, our immaturity, our brokenness, and can be very honest with that. But from that honesty, we will start looking for a healthy reference point, right? We'll start looking for a reference point of what healthy looks like, something that we can use to advance our own lack, our own anemia of understanding. And what's so cool about all of what I'm talking about, when you understand the problem, you can understand why Jesus is such a vital part of the solution. And you can also understand the continuity between what the world is prizing in their actual interactions with God, which is very real, and the conflict of the church, where the church, doesn't really understand a lot. In a lot of ways, we're neither hot, we're neither cold. Spit you right outside of my mouth. We're afraid of going too deep spiritually because of scary, and we're afraid of going too deep into science, because why would we? We have faith, and we become suspended in this nebulous, unuseful place where we're neither hot spiritually and we're neither cold, and so we are tepid and no good, and the world does spit us right out of their mouth. But this right here, this anchoring in actual belief and entering into a conversation of how wisdom works and how we can bear our own testimony, because that is Jesus' example. He says to Nicodemus, I'm telling you of things that I've seen and things that I know, but you don't accept my witness, which is the issue that we're having, right? And so what we need to learn is how to actually speak from a place of what we've seen and what we know. And that's where it becomes really important to grow in spiritual intelligence. It becomes really important to grow in a continuity of how you are operating and what introspective ability you have as a human to connect with why you are doing what you're doing, and to grow in wisdom about why you do what you do, and to do something on purpose about it. And so when you understand the problem, you can understand why Jesus is such a vital part of the solution. Because when you were in that secret place point and you found your own immaturities and your own brokenness and your own anemia of where you just don't know what you don't know, and you know that you don't know what you don't know, and you're allowed to not know what you don't know because you're not so insecure that you're making up things that you don't know to pretend that you know them, because you don't think you have any other option but to know what you don't know and defend yourself because you feel like you're being attacked, and so you have to take a stance. And so you end up, at least that's been my plight. And there's lots of other, things, but that's been a big one for me. And so in that place, when you understand the problem, and this is very large scale, because every single human being is dealing with this, and the issue with existence in this empirical reality is pretty inexorably connected to humans in this space, both empirically speaking and scripturally speaking, existentially speaking. Romans 8. It's because of the futility of man that all of existence is subjected to futility because of the fall of man, essentially. And so when you realize, like, okay, so then what's the problem with man? This is the problem with man. And so then you're like, okay, well, what's the problem, with this man? You're like, okay, we'll go into a secret place and start actually, shrinking the noise and the repercussion of noise and the echo chamber and the confliction crazy, and go and just minimize it to your own internal conflictions, and then be real with yourself about what you are believing and operating out of. Do your best to articulate it as best as you can, but also to not say what you don't know, and to enjoy the gift of saying I don't know. Find your limits, find your confliction, but also find the cohesive connection between what you believe, and allow that to confirm deeper conviction inside of yourself that you would be a more refined expression of your own personal beliefs in the spaces you walk. But you will still find the need for a reference of what healthy looks like when you find your limits. And therefore, when you understand the problem, you will understand why Jesus is a vital part of the solution. Jesus came to reveal the Father. See, we don't necessarily have a grid for why a father solves anything. We don't even have a grid for what a father actually functionally is in this arena a lot of times. And we certainly don't have a grid for what a son functionally is in this arena. But it's very simple. Jesus said, a son only does what he sees the Father doing. So now we have a broken nature, right, where we're kind of like partially operating like sons and creating multiple fathers and doing a lot of things in response to many reference points. many points of wisdom throughout the world, but often we change fathers all the time. We existentially reorient based on the pressures we're under, and there's not a lot of continuity in fathering. We just are kind of grasping for insights all around, but we don't really understand the continuity in that space. And so therefore, sometimes we might latch on to other conflicting sources that seem good, but don't actually root back to a common source of goodness, right? And so then we're at conflict within ourselves, and we don't have a base of operation to begin untangling anything. But if you can begin to connect with this reality in a way where you are looking for the reference point of healthy, you would understand a couple things. You would understand how to evaluate what you know and what you don't know, and how useful wisdom is, because it can draw continuity from that deep heart belief all the way up to, or all the way down, if you want to look at it that way, to the expression, the actual practical implementation. If you can understand that gradient from heart belief to practical implementation, you'll understand the avenue that wisdom functions and how to understand if something is wise, because it bridges those, it transcends or traverses that arena. And so then, now you are more empowered to evaluate based off of what you actually believe and who you are. And then you can begin to evaluate the integrity of a reference point personally, through your own experience and interaction with that reference point. And that's where it becomes very provocative, the wisdom of God, because you personally can now begin to evaluate your own limits based off of the proposed wisdom of God, allowing that to stretch and flex and inform you as you entertain and test personally a wisdom that's now being presented to you through Jesus, who's revealing the Father, and allow the take and the approach of somebody else's existential orientation to then be tested within your own interaction with existence, understanding your limits, understanding your need, understanding your own deficits. And then you can be actually like healed a little bit, because what happens is it's like a hand running through twisted, matted fur, and it takes a lot of trust to let somebody tug and pull at your belief systems that are still conflicting inside of yourselves to suggest a different way of orienting inside of reality. But then he models it. And what he's doing is he's modeling the one who created everything. And so then you would ultimately have access to the baseline hiding inside of the deepest core of existence, where the very heart of God is beating and everything is marching in accordance or in discord to the harmony of the heart of the one who made all things in accordance with his own heart. That's why his expression of his personhood inside of everything is what we begin to collect when we are searching internally for the harmony of wisdom inside of every space that we occupy. And so when you understand the problem, you can understand why Jesus is a vital part of the solution, because Jesus came to reveal the Father. There's a scripture, I need to find it soon, that basically says all of the wisdom of heaven wasn't enough for mankind to be basically cracked out of this problem of leaning on our own understanding instead of acknowledging God. And it's because we just didn't get it. We got so contorted, so twisted, we got so turned around that our instincts and how we even interpreted good information were so broken that we had such a broken filter that we could twist everything that we heard and turn it into something that is systematically anemic, something that is unsustainable inside of the space of wisdom, something that is actually robbing from itself even as its heart beats, something that is inherently being torn apart by existing, something that's dying, instead of going on to flourishing and fruitfulness. It's like those different sects of people who believed that sex was inherently immoral and therefore they died out. And whatever they had or believed or whatever they were carrying, you're not going to convince people to believe what you believe. But it's just as well, and the most hilarious caricature of what I'm talking about inside of the expression of a life and the value of that life. You have no legacy. You removed posterity. Solomon said the end is better than the beginning. But you just removed the end. You inverted the whole thing, and that's the anemic problem we're inside of. And that's the whole, if you would turn from your raw ways and seek my face, I'll heal your land. Because that's the whole thing, is I was always supposed to be the life. I was always supposed to be the dew resting on the soil so it could receive seed. I was always supposed to be the oil that was anointing your head. I was always supposed to be the fire that was warming you. And when you removed me from the equation, existentially, you became in a state of dying because I'm the source of life. And so what Jesus does is he reveals the Father, which breaks the existential anemia and allows us to begin to personally be altered by a beholding of belief. And that's what's so excellent about it, is because a person's heart is going to do this anyway. And so what we need is exposure to Jesus, whether or not he's accepted right away. Because he will deepen your capacity and your existential observation of existence. His voice will echo deeper into your heart and expose chambers you didn't even know were there, but they'll draw context of what's actually happening, and it'll create a granularity and a distinguishing, like light shining into darkness, where you can tell the difference between different objects and locate yourself in a three-dimensional plane and be able to move inside of that plane with depth perception. Like, that's why if you close one of your eyes, it's hard to tell when the ping pong ball is closer to your paddle. That's why I had a really hard time with ping pong until I got glasses, because of the stigmatism. Distinguishing depth is really important, and that's exactly what the increase of existential wisdom, real wisdom, it does. It's what it does. And so that's the whole thing. If you could understand the problem, you can understand why Jesus is such a vital part of the solution. And that's why the invitation to get to know him, Kenan know him, Yada know him, experientially, personally know him, not try to memorize him like a proverb, not try to employ him like a math equation that solves all your problems. No, know him in a way that can transcend this howness that you're hungry for, like a person, where you were actually familiar with the manner in which he conducts himself, so that way that manner itself can transcend different arenas and can inform a space as to the specifics of that space based off of the nature of another space, where you learned the nature of how things work, but yet it was transferable. And that's what howness does for us. It transcends. That's what like David said. He said, because I have kept your ways, I've guarded them, I've looked over them, I've kept them. That's what kept means, to pace and look at. Because I've kept your ways, I understand more than the ancients, he said. Because I've kept your ways. It's because there's an informing and a nature that expands within us. And that's what humans are designed to do. That's what's so exciting about the gospel. But so long as we get this backward way about us, that we're trying to turn everything into a left hemisphere dominated deterministic reality, we'll never be able to enter into the probabilistic reality of the actual existential condition we're in, where quantum mechanics is real. And if you're going to interact with it, you're going to have to learn to think probabilistically and not deterministically. And that's going to challenge a lot of cultural stuff with the scientific method. It really is. And we've been taught wrong. We've been homeschooled in the wrong home. We've been being trained to operate existentially anemically. And that's the whole thing. That's the whole thing right there. So if you could understand the problem, you could understand why Jesus is a vital part of the solution. And that's why I believe what I believe. And that's why, as I'm wanting to encourage people to interact with the purity of how their own existence functions, that ultimately this is pointing back to Jesus. ultimately, this is an invitation to test another source of wisdom, to allow the little waters of your heart to trickle deeper into a space and entertain and experience a person that seems to have more depth and wisdom and be moving out of a deeper existential orientation than everybody else. A true source. Scripture describes him as the one that righteousness adores, because righteousness is a searching of the heart. And when you search Jesus, you become in love, because he is so satisfying when in the way that he informs reality, because he reveals the Father, who is the source of reality. But I don't think a lot of us approach this like this, and so we don't get to a place like this, and we're not even asking a question like this, and so we can't see the value system of this. But I've been learning so much of prayer. It's about drawing comparison between 2 points, and so my 2 points that I'm drawing comparison between are, what is the problem, and how does that have anything to do with Jesus? Those are the 2 points, and the tension between create a river, create a line. And that's what we've just done on purpose. And it's what every single proverb sets you up to do. That's why it's so provocative, the way that Solomon poses 2 seemingly dissimilar situations within the same breath. But as you connect the tension between those 2 points, it forms something inside of you that is wisdom. Because wisdom traverses this existential plane of what it is for a human to experience and therefore know. To yada know, to ken and know. Not Wiesen know, although Wiesen know comes from ken and knowing. Anyway, if you could understand the problem, you could understand why Jesus is a vital part of the solution.